and welcome once again to this series of discussions we have been having on what India Inc. wants from the new government. My first question to you is, each of you explain to me just one big challenge that you face. So to straightaway to you, Mr. Sheshagiri Rao, one big problem. It is not the only problem I know, but the biggest problem.
The major problem today the manufacturing industry is facing is the approvals. Governmental approvals is the major issue. This got delayed in the last 2.5 years, much deeper way. The environmental clearances or any approval process where the government is involved, those approvals are getting delayed. Majorly it is environmental related. Environmental approvals is taking sufficiently long time. So if somebody has to set up any project, in the manufacturing sector, then they need to do first the public hearing. That itself is taking a very long time. After that, the processes which are involved to get the final approval of the Ministry of Environment, and if you divide those processes which are involved, I think it itself is taking a very long time.
To the next man who represents manufacturing sector, Mr. Unnikrishnan, I would assume environment would be a problem, but for you it will be the case of a problem which your clients face. What's your biggest problem?
I want to define it slightly differently, expanding it as a single most problem. We opened up the economy, started reforming the market, and expected the private industry to come forward, and we coined the word PPP, that is public-private participation. So with that, the government has virtually absolved their responsibility and withdrawn, told that it's your responsibility to take care of everything. So if I had to define the problem Mr. Rao has spoken about, is lack of understanding of the policy makers and the governance of this country, that you're wanting private industry to be constructing infrastructure for the country, which is ideally the responsibility of the governance of the country. If you invite them, getting all the clearances, starting with the land acquisition, the clearances, there are 21 different clearances which I'm sure Ajit will talk about in detail. Something that where government had not been able to. We had been pleading with the government that you have to create SPVs like the way you've done for UMPP, for any infrastructure project. The government has got to do their part of the duty, then invite the private sector to come forward, then things can move faster. This lack of understanding.
So pre-cleared projects.
It's absolutely, because for example, we have the Indian Electricity Act passed in 2003. That is a chapter number 1 written in terms of PPP. There is no chapter number 2, 3, 4, 5, and 2014, 11 years down the line, we are still telling that, look, sorry, you guys have to manage everything, you privatize. That lack of understanding about the policy environment is what is the biggest problem for the past 10 years or so.
Rashesh Shah, you analyze earnings of a zillion companies. So on behalf of the many companies that you analyze, one big problem.
We see what happens all through the economy, and I think environmental clearance, investment-friendly environment, all that has been already highlighted. I think what has really happened in the last, if I look at our sector, the financial services, the economy has grown a lot, but the financial sector reforms, as we've been speaking about, have not happened, especially in the credit markets. So I think a lot of industry as well as the financial services, one of the issues everybody is facing is we need the credit markets to evolve. We have spoken a lot about the bond market. I think in the last few years, a lot of our markets have got exported. There is a lot more volume happening in the NDF market and the equity markets outside of India on Indian indices than happening in India. So I think this entire financial sector reforms and the new age financial sector, I think the finance minister has spoken about it. The new RBI governor has spoken about it a lot. They've introduced the interest rate futures, cash settled and all that. But what we need is a very comprehensive, holistic approach to evolving finance for the next 8-10 years, making it investor friendly, making it easy to have available capital at a reasonable cost for the industry.
Ajit, this is more a macro question. From a macroeconomic point of view, really, what is the biggest problem the country faces?
Let's do a Project Tiger approach to the Indian manufacturing sector. You know, there is a World Bank publishes a statistic, a ranking, not that we need to believe in international ranking always, but basically ease of doing business. And it kind of captures how easy is it to do manufacturing business or industrial business. And India's rank is 134 out of 189. India is a large country. We represent 1/7 of humanity. We are in many sectors we have shown manufacturing excellence, and certainly we had the Auto Expo a couple of weeks ago. So we have, but we rank 134. So surely one macro target that the next government should do, or perhaps in the next 5 to 10 years, how can we improve that rank from 134 to let's say 100?
Money or the cost of money or interest rates is not apparently the biggest problem. Projects are stuck for something else. Would you agree, Mr. Rao? I mean, it was not even the fourth problem. What Rashesh was mentioning was not availability of finance as a problem. He was mentioning that one of the preferred agenda for the next government should be that they have to create credit markets, which is well taken. But it's not a bottleneck stopping growth, is it, Mr. Rao?
Yeah, so far we have not faced that problem in India. Projects are stuck because money is not available. Because we were growing at a rate of 9%, 10% even prior to 2008. India has not faced that problem of not able to raise money for completing the projects. So there is enough money because of India's uniqueness of having domestic demand. I think that continues to drive this economy. So we have the domestic demand. In addition to that, we have the potential of very high skilled manpower. So they are the two strengths based on which I don't think money will be a problem in raising either equity or debt. I don't think that can stop the projects to go forward.
Okay. Ajit, would you say the cost of money is an issue at all? I mean, we go to the traditional familiar terrain of growth versus inflation when we talk about the cost of money. That's not at all the debate.
No, if you ask what are the key challenges, like you began the program by asking what is the number one challenge. So if you take a priority of challenges, I don't think the cost of money or availability of credit, availability of bank funds, I don't think that counts for in the top challenges. However, I must say that you are probably talking to people from relatively larger industries and larger companies. If you go to small and medium enterprises, then access to credit and the cost of credit is a serious problem.
When I was speaking to a former environment secretary, he said that the notification very clearly gives both the qualification of the experts and points that they should look at. But subsequent environment ministries have gamed the system, that they have not chosen experts who fulfill those technical qualifications, and therefore what happens is, there are sociologists or NGOs who have entered the system, and therefore the techno-commercial considerations have not been adhered to at all. Is that a problem? Is there a disobedience by the government ministries of its own notifications?
No, there are some guidelines or decisions by the court. Whenever any problem for the manufacturing sector, in the case of environmental clearances arises, they say that this we cannot do anything, this is the problem imposed by the court, therefore you have to approach the court. So it is in between. Some decisions are from the court, something environmental ministry is not able to act on this. And at the same time, the kind of issues which are there, even assuming that we are not near the coast, we are in the middle of landlocked place, but there is again the wildlife related issues where several clearances have to be obtained. Some are within the purview of the state, some are within the purview of the center. So getting not only relating to the environment, but relating to the wildlife compliances, that also is taking sufficiently long time. Even assuming some clearances are coming in between what kind of problems that can come in is anybody's guess. So much of uncertainty has come, complete lack of trust. That's why it is finding increasingly difficult for the industry to take a project.
Is there any answer to judicial activism or civil rights activism? Okay, let me start with Ajit at that point. Ajit, you yourself are involved in a lot of NGOs. You yourself are, in a sense, a civil activist. Is civil activism to be seen as a nuisance, or is it that 90% of the cases represent the right point?
We can never call activism as negative. We don't want a sleeping population. We want active and engaged, if you want a vibrant, robust democracy, of course you want people to be engaged.
Every country has a robust democracy, and every country guards its environment better than we have guarded. And yet they are able to get projects kick-started. So where is the fine line between judicial activism and civil activism on the one hand and decision making on the other? What is it that the next government need to do to strike the balance?
I feel like has been mentioned that we need to increase the bandwidth of the government. So there are areas which not a single shrub is visible, and then you still need a forest clearance, and there's nobody decisive enough to come and say, no, this clearance is given. That it will go on, you'll keep on getting dates, postponed, so on and so forth.
But is this a result of judicial activism or civil activism?
Yeah, the space which the activists occupy is the space, the vacuum left by indecisiveness.
Okay.
If there was a proper, all the rules, by the way, I think most of the rules are fairly laid down. They might be quite onerous compared to other countries, but at least the rules are in place. But when you try to implement the rules step by step and have people have those panels, tribunals, committees, hearings, public hearings, if they can be done in quick succession, and every process has to end with a decision, and you need a decision-making authority. It may be the local district magistrate, it may be a judicial, semi-judicial person, it may be an expert person. So if you leave all these things hanging, then you are going to, that space is going to be occupied by more activism.
Mr. Shah, just as an aside, since that will also impact the evolution of credit markets and the performance of the stock markets, do you think the markets and India Inc. is heavily betting on a Modi trade? If that were not to happen, if supposedly the one decisive leader who perhaps is emerging as the winner in all opinion polls does not win, do you think that we are going to see a major toss in credit markets, equity markets?
I think since this is an area that everybody is focusing on, and currently they might be, tilting to in a particular way, my expectation is that even before the elections, I think the trends will start getting factored in, and whatever be the outcome, everybody is hoping it will not be a shocker of an outcome, because I think it's not that at least a lot of investors want a particular leader. I think what everybody wants is a good stable government, so there should be some decisiveness around whoever comes there, and they also want pro-business. So even if there is, say, any other government, but if it shows that it is pro-business, like today morning we saw that Aam Aadmi is also saying we are pro-business. So anybody who comes, because I think pro-business, pro-investment, pro-reforms is also a crying need right now, as we spoke about the ease of doing business, and also, saying we need to get back to some reasonable level of growth. In fact, one of the things that I think is not a good thing to do is to say, the whole world is slowing down, we are still doing 5%, it's not bad. It seems, like a very empty justification. We have to say we need to get back, and any leader who comes there, if he says that, I think it should be okay.
My point is that we have to even think of a possibility of maybe a third front government. A possibility that is less discussed. Ajit, would you say that our last experience with the third front government was all that disastrous? We moved towards capital account convertibility reasonably in that period. We tied it through the Asian crisis. Is it that India Inc. or even the markets are creating a monster out of a third front government, which is perhaps uncalled for?
By the way, our current finance minister, Mr. Chidambaram, takes great pride, and perhaps partly justified, that his dream budget, which people credit him with the dream budget, that was during the the third front government. We actually recorded, I think, something like an average 7% or 7.5% growth rate during those years, which was the highest in that decade then. So I don't think, it is about, like I think Rashesh said, predictability, stability.
But there you may have a leadership issue.
No, but I also want to correct. You said decisiveness, but decisive doesn't mean just one person has to be decisive. It has to be percolating through the system. There are bureaucrats who take decisions. There are semi-judicial competent authorities and experts, especially in the field of environment clearance. There are ministers. So it is not only that one person has to be decisive. It is that decisiveness has to be reflected in the government's functioning. Speed of implementation, speed of decision making. These are what, and that comes when there's a confidence building within the government, and there's a trust building between government and business. Is inflation an issue which any of you see as taking away your consumers, Mr. Rao?
Inflation is a major issue for any economy, particularly consistently for the last few years. Inflation is high in India. But the point is where the inflation is. If manufacturing sector, if you see, the inflation is not there at all. If real interest rates to manufacturing sector, if somebody has to talk about, when inflation in the manufacturing goods is in the range of 2%, and the real interest rate is 12%, nominal interest rate is 12%, if we have to pay 10%, then definitely the interest rate is very expensive. So inflation is coming from the food products or fuel, not from manufacturing goods. Whereas today, by keeping the economy at a very high interest rate economy, manufacturing sector is getting penalized. So the impact of that, the consequence of that is investment cycle is coming down and employment is not happening. That has a very, very negative impact. Therefore, we have to divide this inflation factor into various segments, which is contributing to that, and how to address that sector, thereby it becomes competitive, not only to meet the domestic demand, but also to meet the
Rashesh, is that something which you can see in the P&Ls of companies?
Yeah, I think absolutely, because inflation affects everything. I think in a very slow and steady manner, sometimes very invisible manner, it affects everything. And as Mr. Rao was saying, I think the manufacturing sector has not seen pricing power, and it has been a factor for which inflation had stayed subdued. The large part of the culprit, in fact, for the last 8 years, government has been increasing MSP price in food prices, and that has been one of the key culprits for the food inflation. Fortunately, this is the first year where the MSP increase was about only 5-6%, and we are already starting to see some effect on food inflation because of that. So if there is another thing if the government has to do is to make sure the MSP price is controlled, which will hopefully get food under control and then inflation under control.
Okay, now we have to wind up in terms of what are your priorities in terms of agenda. Let me come to one issue which seems to underlie what you all are saying. What appears to be lacking is trust. The trust from the political authorities in business, and the trust from business towards political authorities in terms that they will back with their political might once an investment is already made. Lack of certainty. Now this is technically an intangible. It is an agenda. Can you tell the next government that the first thing we want is that you trust us? Or can the government say that the first thing we will deliver is that we will back all your decisions? Trust is the big thing. It is an intangible. Is there anything in the horizon which makes you feel, Mr. Rao, that this break in sentiment is round the corner?
No, we are very, very hopeful that a stable government will come, and a decisive government with support to the industry will come. So therefore, once the elections are over, because if you just look at since 2009, whatever elections that have happened in India, it is very decisive, irrespective of which party is in power, in whichever state it is. If they are not delivering, I think that government is changed. So that is what we have seen in the past.
Okay.
So therefore, similarly,
so for you it is political leadership. If there is certainty, you see trust returning.
Yeah, I think so. So once a decisive government, pro-industry and pro-development, once that government takes in position, I am very, very hopeful that we will come back.
Actually, Lata, in fact, in the last 6-7 months, we actually did have that sign. The investment monitoring group.
When the CCI was set up?
Yes. So that showed that once that came into being, there was some visible progress, except that then people started saying that if it's at the apex level, at the central government level, we also need similar setup at the state level. But there is clearly something, that came far too late in the 5-year period. So this is something which will quickly set,
Okay. Final word, Mr. Unnikrishnan, did the CCI really serve its purpose? Is that something which the new government should build on? Probably build bridges with the state government on the same model? Is that an agenda?
It is improved from past, not met the full requirement. We didn't ask for a CCA. Actually, we wanted a steering group as a single window clearance where one person in the government had all the authority to move each of the ministries. That is what they need to be doing.
So, Rashesh Shah, just to conclude the argument, do you think one major task for the next government is actually to build bridges between governments? The GST is stuck because there is no communication between central and state. A whole host of environment and land acquisition and fuel approvals and mining approvals are stuck because the central and state governments are not talking to each other. So rather than trust between business and politics, is it between politician and politician that the trust should come, or between party and government that the trust should come?
I think absolutely. I think any democracy, whether it's India or any others, there will always be two sides to every argument. And I think governments all over the world in a democratic format will only work when there is a give and take, when there is a compromise, when there is an understanding of, I give a little bit, you give a little bit, and we achieve some common goal without compromising our political positions. And that is how all politics works. It has worked in India also for quite some time. So I think if it gets back to that, it would be a great thing. But I think whoever is in the government, whoever is the prime minister, they need to bring this sense of urgency back. And I think in the last 1 year, fortunately, it has already started coming back, because what we have seen in the last 1 year shows that when India faces a crisis or some semblance of a crisis, we can act, and there are enough low-hanging fruits. We can get it done. You know, we got a CAD in order. We got a lot of
Absolutely.
stuff. So India can get it done if there is just the will out there. So we need somebody who says we will get it done.
On that note, Ajit, Mr. Unnikrishnan, Rashesh Shah and Mr. Rao, thank you very much for joining us in this discussion on what India wants. Thank you to all of you, ladies and gentlemen, as well.